What's up? It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody's kind of taking a nap. Maybe somebody's working on some stuff, some work back there. That's cool. That's cool. I won't take offense to it. Just super excited to be here. I was here last year at the Spotlight UX event. I was doing another talk on design sprints. So really grateful for Sean for inviting me back. It's always a pleasure to come to these events. I feel like I actually, I get just as much from events like this as you do, with the added benefit that I didn't have to pay. So that's kind of cool. Just before we begin, again, thank you all for coming and for showing up. These are pretty bright, so I think you'll be able to see them okay. Just want to give a couple of shout outs to some folks that I saw on the attendee list that I thought was pretty cool. Where are the folks from the Ontario Science Centre? Ontario Science Centre, give it up for them, like they're awesome. There are also a bunch of people from Durham College. I saw a bunch of profs and stuff from Durham College. Where's the Durham College folks? Okay, back there. So these are the folks that are like our educators, and they continue to push the envelope with, educating folks in our field, which is amazing. We didn't have that a long time ago. I also want to give it up to some folks from my hometown. Where are the Bridget team? Right here, yes. What's up? K-Dubs in the house. All right. I think we also have some freelancers here. So a bunch of people that are sort of working on their own, not sort of, not slave to the boss. Any freelancers here? All right, so people that know their shit. I like it. And finally, there's a bunch of agencies here as well, right? Some agency folks here. I saw some agencies as well. So any agencies here? Hands up for agency folks. Okay, awesome. Again, people that are really sort of trying to make their mark in the world. So cool. This talk is about product design. I'm a product designer. I'm going to give you a little bit of sort of insight into what I've done in my career. Started a really long time ago. I still didn't have hair back then either. It was in 2000 when I started. I started a sort of a design company that didn't really have a lot of direction. I ended up actually running that company for about 12 years, and we did a bunch of stuff. I found this picture. Also, I've been involved in like this FITC thing now for a while. I'm not sure what does anybody know what FITC stands for right now? Yeah? No, right now. That's right. And back in the day, it was called Flash in the Can. And check this picture out that I pulled out from the vault. What? See, I told you, no hair back then either. So yeah, this was me in 2004 when I won that crazy award by Flash in the Can. It was actually run out of Kensington Market. We had a tiny little shop. And so yeah, I've been part of this event as it's evolved over so many years. And it's just as awesome as it was back then. The community is still really supportive. Of course, there's no way in hell that I'd ever be able to win this award now. The kinds of designers that we have right now are so diverse and so ridiculously talented. I would be ashamed to just even suggest that I was on any of their levels. I had an intern recently. She's a systems design engineer at Waterloo, and her skill is just almost unmatchable in terms of quality of design, her artistic sense, and of course her ridiculous engineering ability. And she's only in second year. It's bananas. So it's very cool. So yeah, so this is a little bit about me. So right now I actually run a company called Signal UX. It's a product design company. I really focus on building the right product instead of building the product right. I did the building the product right thing for like 16 years of my career, running 2 software development companies, of which I ran the company /design team, and then there was on the engineering team as well. I also am an engineer. I went to this school, U of T, and I live in Waterloo right now, so whenever I say, oh, I went to U of T, I get like a big thumbs down. But finally, I can say with pride, my school is across the street. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to actually ship design products, and what I sort of mean by that. It's really taken a page or like one of the commandments of the Agile manifesto. I don't think they look like that, but he looks pretty impressive. And it's really the guiding principle that I use in the way that I create and design products within our company. And it really is simplicity and the art of maximizing work not done. It's kind of a really random sentence. Whenever I present it to my clients, I always use this. It makes me feel super smart, which I'm not. But the idea is, like in sort of simple terms, it's reduce waste, don't make a lot of useful or useless stuff. And that's actually quite inherent to what we do as designers. We always end up creating artifacts that are just unnecessary. We create a lot of useless crap. And the motivation behind this talk is to really focus your effort on getting things closer to shipping, to actually launch this thing, get it out the door, but not ineffectively or shipping shitty products. You're actually looking to ship quality products. And how do you actually do that? So I'm going to take you through my process that I've been working on for a really long time. It's super opinionated. This is what I do. So there are going to be some things that you're going to be like, what? And sorry. Okay, so we have a bunch of disciplines, a number of actual things, like hard things that it takes to pull off product design. As a product designer, you might fall into one of these categories. You might fall into several of these categories. You might actually do all of these categories and hence have the title unicorn, ninja, whatever it is. And all of these things are super important. And again, the idea here is how can you actually go from here, and how can you start to expand your horizons if you are, if you're in this category as a visual designer. What can you do? What tools can you sort of bring to the table that will allow you to sort of expand your field of vision and improve and perhaps master all of them? So that's really the idea. So this colorful slide is really sort of what I see as what it takes to create great products. You need sort of these three roles. You have product engineering, product management, and product design. The business side is product management, I believe. And they all overlap. And your goal as a designer, so that little white part here, if anybody, can you guys see that white part? It looks really great from here. I know that it doesn't look so great from up there. But I'm going to assume that you can. And the little white part in the design circle is really what I find a lot of designers, like young designers or designers that sort of fall into this little trap of not being able to go beyond their horizon. And this talk is about how you do that, the tools you use, and how you make that happen as a designer, expand your career. So if you're stuck in this little design loop where you're maybe the visual designer or the interaction designer or add random title here that you invented yesterday, designer, that could work. But really the idea should be the intent that you have as a designer. And your intent should be get the product to ship and move the needle on actually saying, okay, we're here in a wireframe stage or in a sketch stage or in a prototype stage. what can I do to actually get us a little bit further so that we can actually do some stuff. And if you can actually fill that circle, overlap with engineering, overlap with business, and maybe even make the circle bigger itself, then you've achieved, over time, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but you will have achieved the ability to ship products more efficiently and more effectively with a better understanding of your users and your team than you would have previously. Okay, so it's taken me a long time to figure out how to do that, but I think we have the kinds of tools and frameworks available today that we didn't have back in the day, and that's what we're going to talk about. So this dude from IDEO, CEO Tim Brown, has this really awesome concept of this T, and be a T-shaped person. I'm sure who's not heard of the T-shaped person? Okay, everyone. So everyone knows the T-shaped person, and it's a really sort of simple idea where the vertical axis is really talking about the depth of your understanding. Again, go back to the slide that I just presented. How do you start to add all of these little experiences and really lengthen this vertical axis for your depth of understanding of being a designer? And then, of course, the top part is the ability for you to collaborate with the rest of the folks on your team. Because believe it or not, products don't make themselves, and they certainly don't get made in a vacuum. So if you're only one of these two things, you've got some work to do. A lot of times I find designers, especially experienced ones, they have a pretty short T at the top because it's kind of hard to collaborate, because design is sometimes quite subjective, and you start to get sort of really sucked into you fall in love with the work that you do, so that it's actually really difficult for you to share. I was a designer like this, and it was my approach was, well, I'm going to work on this thing for a really long time, and then I'm going to show it to you. And that sucks in so many ways, because you can't really identify the mistakes that you're making until you actually share it. So be open, be collaborative, be sharing, and you should really expect that from your team as well, because if they're just going to shit on everything that you just made, well, you really don't want to be in that team. It's not going to be that fun. So be a T. Okay, so we're going to just jump into some tools and some processes that I like to use to actually make products. I love this book. In fact, last year, my random design title was Design Sprint Facilitator. It was on my LinkedIn until like last month, and I was like, okay, this is crazy. So I changed that. But I've actually run quite a few sprints now, design sprint styles. I think about like 30-something. And I definitely swear by the process, but I also swear that it's not a process that you use all the time for absolutely everything. That's why the big thumbs up and the small thumbs down. So the things that I love about design sprints is, one, it happens in a really short, compressed amount of time. Two, as a designer, if you aren't familiar with some of the other design techniques, such as user interviewing and user research, mostly user interviewing because there isn't that much research in a sprint. User interviewing is sometimes unfamiliar to you, or prototyping, that may be kind of unfamiliar, or just facilitation in general, getting other people that may or may not be designers to participate in a design exercise is a great, great activity. And if you haven't done a design sprint, I highly recommend it. But on the flip side, the things that are not so great about a design sprint is that if I ran a marathon tomorrow, I'd probably kind of suck at it. And a design sprint or an activity like it is not much different in that you're not going to yield the kind of results that you thought you would yield just because you did one. You need to do like 10. and then you start to get good at it. You start to understand how you're actually going to start to extract the information from this diverse group of people that are participating in there, and then you'll actually start to say, oh, okay, this is how I can actually make it useful. So I've attended like lots of sort of design sprint workshops, and you know, a lot of people, it's just a big ass meeting, and that is not fun to attend, I promise you. Don't do that. So there are some techniques that you can follow along in the book that you have to really religiously follow, because if you don't, again, it's just going to be a really long meeting, and meetings suck. The other component that I'm not a fan of with design sprints is its unfortunate popularity. And its unfortunate popularity is simply a function of, we need a design sprint for everything. Hey, we need user sign-in. Let's do a design sprint. No. You can solve sign-in because this solved like 10,000 times over. You just need an hour, and you can just fix it. Or we need to, figure out this workflow. Let's bring 5 people and plan out 5 days and lunches and all this other craziness. No, you need to know when to design sprint and when not to. And in most cases, you don't need to. In most cases, you can sit down with a pen and a pad, like Dr. Dre, and actually solve it, okay? The other big tool that I use is on the visual design side of things. As a UI designer, there's 3 things I use. There's like thousands of tools out there, but there's only 3 that I care about. These 3. Google Docs is the first design tool that I use, like design tool number 1 in terms of like tooling. Google Sheets is the second one, and Figma, that this presentation is actually made in, is the third. Has anybody heard of Figma? Work with Figma? Figma is the boss. Figma is going to take over your life. Took over my life. Thanks to this guy, my good friend Tom Lowry. The thing that all of these products have in common is the fact that they are all collaborative tools. Figma is the Google Docs of a design tool. So I talked earlier about sort of being a collaborative type person with a big T-shaped kind of thing. These 3 tools allow you to do that. It also makes you completely transparent. And transparency is something I struggled with for a long time, to say, yeah, look at my work as it's being made. It's a crazy idea, because a lot of times you want to sort of like hide, draw my stuff, and I'm not going to show you, and then you finally do this big ta-da. That sometimes works okay. So Figma as a design tool is simply, here it is, it's browser-based, and allows me to actually share everything all the time in real time with all our customers. And it also sort of enforces me to make sure that the work that I'm doing is actually of a high quality. The frequency is there, because they can, my customers can also see, oh yeah, he only saw this file like 24 days ago. I guess he's not working on my project. So it kind of forces you to actually get your shit done too. So it's a great tool. Well, you might, in speaking of tools, you might have noticed that I went from like low fidelity, sort of sprint meeting, collaborative type stuff, directly into UI tools, because I have not made a grayscale wireframe with Axure or Balsamic in like 10 years. It's actually like deleted from my process. Wireframing is not a thing I do. It's kind of a scary thought. And why is it? Because the last wireframe I made was actually when I redesigned the website for a sports media company, TSN. And I spent like 7 months on just wireframing, like I think 200 pages of this application. It was horrible. And it was black and white, and it was documented. with like little dots, and it had red lines for all kinds of stuff. And remember when I talked earlier, simplicity, the art of maximizing work not done? That was the art of maximizing bullshit. So after 7 months, I had a giant Axure document of all of this stuff that didn't end up being used. It didn't end up looking like anything. In fact, the design of the actual, what you see right now, is almost totally different from what I ended up wireframing for 7 months. It was horrible. And it was the complete sort of opposite of an agile, iterative process that allows you to move quickly and efficiently. Efficiency is the key. So these tools allow you to do that. The other tool that allows you to do that is not on this slide because it wouldn't fit, is design systems. And we'll talk a little bit about design systems, I think, in the next slide. But design systems from the perspective of small teams. Carl, who didn't show up earlier today, unfortunately, because he's really sick, was going to be talking about prototyping, and this was going to be my slide without the fail part, because you would have already had all this amazing information on prototyping, which you now don't have. So, sorry. But I will do my best in sort of describing the approach that we take to prototyping, how important of a process it is, and how we do it, which is probably a little bit different from how a lot of other people do. So the tool set of prototyping, or the tools available for prototyping, are like bonkers right now. It starts with like paper prototyping, or like, I guess there's even like whiteboard. No, that's not a thing. Paper prototyping, low fidelity, but then you can take those prototypes and you can take pictures of them and you can put them like on a little Marvel app, so it actually acts like a little app on your phone. That are still sort of stitched together sketches on your phone that operate like menus and whatnot. From there, you can increase that fidelity and go into full UI design, and then build that prototype out into something like InVision. And then, the much hyped InVision Studio, whenever that's coming out. I think it's out. I don't know. I think I have like an invite. I didn't. Anyways. It's like the world's best amazing design tool that's not here yet. You could use that. Then there's higher fidelity prototyping tools such as Framer, if anybody's used that, or the the Facebook version, which is called Origami, that I'm sure no one's ever used because it's like horrible. And then anyways, there's a boatload of prototyping tools. But there's one prototyping tool that I really, really like that we don't actually talk about because it doesn't come with a fancy UI. And it's specific to being able to prototype web products or anything that actually lives in the browser. And that, lo and behold, prototyping tool is the browser. Amazing tool. Wow, what a cool thing that we invented. And in order to be able to do that, you need to know some freaking CSS. Okay? I've worked with, met with, talked to so many designers in my career, and the first thing that they do is complain about learning CSS. And here's the thing about CSS. You're not really much of a programmer or much of a designer. Just let's take the simple example. If you were like a letterpress printing guy like 50 years ago and you didn't know how to operate the machine, you wouldn't really be that person creating any kind of print material at all. But fast forward to right now, if you're a print designer and you don't actually know how to set up your file in InDesign and make it print ready with all your fonts embedded, and I don't know what else you print guys do if you do that, all of that stuff, you wouldn't be really much of a print designer. And you're not going to be much of a screen designer if you don't know the fundamentals of CSS. And I can't sort of express this enough, but CSS is not programming. It's layout. And it has never been a better time for CSS because it's so much less painful right now than, just rewind like 6 years ago when you had to deal with IE 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I had to deal with IE 11 like 2 weeks ago. It's like, what is IE 11? That's a thing? So, yeah, it's a thing, apparently. The worst part about IE 11, it's only ever used by the boss that pays you. It's like, why? You're one guy. Anyways, so the other thing about learning CSS and doing a good job at it is frameworks like Bootstrap and Foundation 5, they gave us sort of novice CSS people the ability to lay out using their grid systems and whatnot, because it was using some crazy science, float left, float right. I think there are other float properties, clear, both, none, I don't even know, it's bonkers. They gave us these tools to allow us to create usable stuff on the web that wouldn't explode every time you resize your browser. But the other thing that it gave us is the same thing, which has made like web design ugly. It's just so ugly because it is homogeneous. Like you barely have to do any work. Just download your most recent theme from Theme Forest, and bam, you have a website. In terms of like differentiating your product or your brand, that's not really important anymore. If you read up on those blogs in Conversion XL, they'll tell you got to have the big picture at the top, you got to have a little call to action form on the right, not left. Make sure your scroll bar is here, 800 pixels below, just above the fold, and 3-column layout, blah, blah, blah. Yes, all true, but it is ugly. And I think that's actually starting to become a big trend or an unfortunate trend where everything looks the same. And we don't have to work with frameworks as much as we were dependent on them before. Learn some CSS. And a great resource is like somebody who I absolutely love. Her name is Jen Simmons. She is the developer and designer advocate at Mozilla. She's got a YouTube channel called Layoutland, and like her videos are super, super informative. She's an old school designer with all kinds of new school tricks. She's also responsible for designing the super cool tool that's actually a CSS grid and Flexbox editor directly inside the Mozilla browser. So super cool. Another easy way to, sorry, how much time do I have left? 10 minutes, okay, great. Another easy way to learn CSS is by picking up another web layout tool that I use every day. It's called Webflow. If anybody's used Webflow before or not used Webflow, I highly recommend it. Another really, really great tool that is a design interface, like a GUI for HTML, and it actually outputs proper HTML. Doesn't support CSS Grid yet, or like super cool tools like Object Fit, and Calc. Calc is great. Still good. So now I'm going to tell you a story. A little fire in the background. Okay. So the story is around what I like a predicament that I put myself into when I started with this client. They're called Riverside Millwork, and the product that we're actually creating for them is a transformation of their kind of old paper-based system for capturing data and like recording information into something much more dynamic, and was like digital and whatnot. We ran a design sprint. It was a great little design sprint. It was a modified version of a sprint that I'll talk about at some other point. If you have questions, we can talk about it later. But we did this design sprint, and I designed the entire UI. There was a high-fidelity prototype. I built the entire thing in Sketch, and it was wonderful. It was kind of based a little or slightly on material design, but it was mostly like Dayton's material design version. And the prototype went off without a hitch. We tested it with a bunch of users and whatnot. It was fantastic. 3 months fast forward, and the client comes back to me and says, Dayton, we want to make this thing. And I was like, okay, cool, let's make it. I talked to my dev team, and they say, well, I don't know what you've designed here, but this is not something we could possibly make given the constraints that we have with the things that we're doing. The tech stack that we ended up choosing was Node and React. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take a look at what kind of React UI framework we're going to use. It was Material UI for React. And I was like, okay, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go back to Sketch, and I'm going to redesign everything so that it will fit the Material UI to perfection. And then I reminded myself about the art of maximizing work not done. And what I reminded myself was, I'm simply going backwards at this point by designing in a tool and prototyping with pictures of the application. Well, what can I be? How can I be slightly more useful than this? There's got to be something that I can do that is a little bit more useful. So I said, Tamer, who's my software engineer, I'm like, what would be more useful? Like, he's like, well, could you make static views of this thing in HTML? I'm like, yeah, I know some HTML. Sure, of course I can. And I was like, but is that going to be good enough? I'm like, well, then I'm going to have to do stuff and rebuild it using the Material UI framework. I was like, well, what if I just built the thing in Material UI? And he's like, oh, that would be amazing. I'm like, yes, totally do that. Because then we can actually use exactly what you've done as a static version of the app. I can put all the logic in it, connect it to the backend, blah, 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 and bam, we'll have an app. And so I spent 4 days learning React, learning Material UI, and actually building a fully functioning prototype with static information, because my goal was to move the needle and design to ship. Okay? So that's what I did. Story time's over. My intern was sitting beside me, and she asked me, so are you a designer who codes? And I'm like, not really. I mean, copying and pasting some blocks of HTML or JavaScript and just hoping that it works and asking my dev team, was like, hey, is this correct? It's not really programming. No, I'm not a designer who codes, but I am a designer who cares. And I think that's the fundamental difference around the decisions that you make as a designer, because if you care enough, then you will find a way to bring the work that you do closer to being able to ship your products. Please do this, okay? Please. It's not hard. It's like 6 things. Push, pull, commit. It's not difficult. Every software engineering team worth their salt builds with Git, either with GitHub or with Bitbucket. If you're so inclined, you can actually use the GUIs for this. So you can use GitHub's client, or you can use SourceTree. But 6 commands. It's no big deal. And when you hit a merge conflict, just freak out. Okay? So you're going to solve that. Just freak out. I don't know what happened. Developer will come and save you almost every time. But every time they save you, you learn a little. You learn something. Maybe you're using a Rails app, and all you got to do is rake db migrate. Boom, done. Okay, problem solved again. The advantage of you being able to do this is that you're not going to be designing in a silo. handing it off to your dev team, who's going to make some randomness, and then you get to look at it and be like, what is this? Right? Because that happens. That happens all the time. That happened to me yesterday. And my client shat on me. I was like, dude, sorry. Okay, I didn't pay attention. So this will actually allow you to, pull some of the work that they've done, take a look at it yourself. If you've got like Node or whatever running on your machine, which you should do, also get a developer to do that. Don't try to install NPM. Oh my God, worst. Horror show. Okay, I fail every time. Anyways, get them to do that, and then you pull the branch, you look at it, you can actually see for yourself what it looks like, and then you can make those finicky little changes. Oh, I don't like the margin. It's got to be 16 pixels instead of 8 pixels, or 24 pixels. Observe, I only ever use 8s. I hope you guys are designing with base 8 as well. You should. No 10s. Only iOS is in 10s. Screw that. Anyways, so learn that. And I think one more really important thing around technology, or this kind of sort of immersing yourself into the development process, especially if it's an agile process, and if your development team is using GitFlow, which is a really great agile process where people are, if this is over your heads, it's okay, but not for long. Okay, if you're going to be working on a product team that is actually shipping software or shipping features, don't let this stuff go over your heads for long, because you need to throw yourself into it head first. And when you do, you will start to gain the kind of empathy and collaborative strength that you need for your dev team to love you, so that you can go home and cry by yourself. But at least you'll have love at work. Again, important for the workplace. So immerse yourself, get in there. I think one of the easiest ways is when there's a feature that's almost ready for merging back into the trunk, you actually sit and review with your dev team, and you can do it over screen share if they're remote. Otherwise, you can pair side by side without having to actually write any code. And then you can sort of do the whole little pixel pushing until you feel confident enough to do the pixel pushing yourself and actually do those locally on your own device. And always be validating, okay? So this comes back to, like, you're sort of going full circle now, and you're almost done, you're almost ready to ship, or maybe you have shipped your product, and remember those hypotheses that you made in your design sprint, or in any of the activities that you've done, and the user flows that you imagine to be true. You're making a lot of random decisions that are based on gut feelings, etc. I got 0 minutes, so this is going to be quick. Don't worry, it's the second last slide. So always be validating. You already heard Leslie's presentation, so data is important, but meaningful data is even more important. Just don't collect a bunch of stuff, because it simply piles up and you don't know what to do with it. Make sure that you're actually tracking things that you care about. And once all of this is done, you can dab it out, rinse and repeat. That is it, I'm done. If you have any questions, I'll be at the mixer later on, or now.